welcome to Ray Presents. Today I'm happy, a privilege to have a guest, Dominga Robinson, who is here, Afro-Indigenous leader, who's willing to sit down with me and have a conversation about the great work she's doing in the community. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well. Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday. Thanks for being here today. So tell me, I'll go right ahead. Given your personal background as an intergenerational survivor and residential schools and the Sixties Scoop, how do you approach your legal education to address the ongoing impacts of colonialism on Indigenous peoples and communities?
This has been a driving force for my entire career. Prior to going to law school, I worked in culture and funding. And through that, I was able to kind of help communities to revitalize their languages, help them to revitalize their culture. And I felt that that was a direct action of decolonization, obviously. But at some point, I recognized that I was feeling very frustrated within the funding system. And so I wanted to kind of shift my approach to helping the nations to enact their own self-government and
Mm-hmm.
helping them to develop their own laws to prevent things like what happened to my grandmother and my mother and the impacts of that on other people. And so I believe that our nations, the indigenous nations, have that ability to really push the envelope forward. And I'm very excited for the opportunity to assist through this different avenue of what I see as the same as what I was doing before,
Mm-hmm.
which is a decolonization. The impacts of residential school and the 60s scoop on my family really it was upsetting. I didn't get to know my grandmother. She passed away soon after residential school. My mom was only 3 years old when she passed. And so I sometimes don't even think of her as a survivor because I think that it just took a little bit longer for her to, those impacts to end her life. And so because my mom didn't have a mom, she was susceptible to 60s scoop and ended up in a whole different world trying to navigate that. I'm very, very grateful, that she remembered where she was from and that the family remembers us and remembers where she, missed her, desperately missed her, and were willing to, accept us with open arms. And so I saw her go through this journey of reconnecting back to her culture, reconnecting back to the community, and she brought me along on that journey with her.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing her struggle with that and feeling displaced in the world and not feeling like she had a place where she fit until she did, was frustrating. It was really hard. And to know that this all happened as a result of government policies and laws that gave the government the power to be able to do this to Indigenous people, and knowing that our story, is not unique, really was a driving force to get me into law school. I'll never forget, on the first day, the dean comes up he's doing the rounds, introducing himself to the new students. And he comes up to me and he's like, "So why are you here? Why are you trying to go to law school?" And at the time, my response was, "I'm here to learn how to fight with the government."
Guns
And I really,
blazing.
you know, I was straight up about it. And I think over the years of my time going there, it shifted a little bit, where maybe not so much of this aggressive action towards the government, but more of a way to support the nations to enact their sovereignty I'm really excited about Bill C-92 that happened yesterday with the Supreme Court,
Hmm.
which, reaffirmed that the nations can go ahead with their own child and welfare services. This was something that I was really passionate about when I came into law school. So I was so excited to see that someone else had already picked up that battle. And so, and that now they've been successful in that element, at least. I think there's a lot of work yet to be done, and I'm really excited to be a part of doing that, helping the communities in that different way. So, yeah.
Amazing, amazing. Can you share some insights into the specific challenges faced by Afro Indigenous peoples within the broader Indigenous rights movement, and how you work to address these challenges in your advocacy work?
Yeah. I think that, a lot of times people will, you know, judge me on my appearance. And initially they will look at me and assume that I'm, very well versed on Black issues,
Hmm.
and I see a lot of common similarities between what we deal with, but I also see them being quite different, um, and very nuanced, and specific into the different challenges that each community has had to go through. And so for me, I think one of the challenges is that this outer appearance doesn't necessarily align with my lived experience, which is, growing up with a 60s Scoop family, this Norwegian family that my mom was fostered into, were part of my childhood. And then this reconnection back to the Indigenous community. I didn't really connect with my dad and that side of my family until I was an adult already.
Okay.
And I think a lot of my worldview had already been formed.
Hmm.
So I think I almost have to choose sometimes. I can't do both at the same time. It's a lot. And there's different struggles. So I almost have to
It's heavy
pick and
struggles.
choose which battle I'm going to take on and which movement I'm going to be pushing forward for. And because my worldview is more connected to Indigenous community, and I've felt those impacts so much. I don't even, I don't even think I would exist as an Afro-Indigenous person if the government hadn't taken my mom. Like, it's quite a story of how I came to be. But essentially, I don't think my mom and my dad would have met, which is something that, I've had to kind of deal with personally because I love who I am. I love both of my heritages. But I also, there's this thing, where the challenges that I've had to go through, navigating both of these worlds and trying to figure out where I fit
Yeah.
wouldn't have happened if the government hadn't taken my mother in the first place.
Wow. Wow.
Um, so it's, I'm grateful on one hand that I am who I am, and I wouldn't want it any other way. But on the other hand, there's this underlying, anger about this upset, about this disruption of my family uh,
Hmm.
that occurred, that created me
Wow.
as I am. So it's something that I've definitely had to try to navigate. Um, I think I'm okay with it now. I love who I am. I wouldn't want to be anyone else, and be anything else than what I am now. But it's definitely been a journey to get here. And I know that I experienced quite a bit of confusion about this when I was younger. So,
Yeah, it's always interesting when I speak to people who have different backgrounds, multiple backgrounds. For you, it's Afro Indigenous, and I always speak of, okay, is there a point where you say, okay, I want to go this way or that way, or did you find balance? So I always find that very, very interesting. You know, um, another question I have for you is, in your role as Indigenous Law Student Association. How do you know basically what initiatives or strategies do you implement to foster supportive and inclusive environment for Indigenous students who pursue the legal education?
Yeah. It's funny because this question actually is almost a pickup of the last one because
Hmm.
I was approached by the Black and Law Students Association and had to make a choice.
Is that right? Huh?
I did. And I had already been participating in the Indigenous Law Students Association since my first year. And since that was my motivator to come to law school, it just made more sense for me to choose to continue as the Indigenous Law Students president. But through that, what I've done is the same thing I've been doing throughout my career. I thought, oh, maybe I can bring some of the lessons and experiences and skill sets that I developed as a cultural funder into the law school because I noticed a real lack of opportunities for students to engage with Indigenous law. And this is not Aboriginal law through Canadian lenses. This is, ceremonies. This is the lessons and teachings that you get from elders. And so that was one of the main things that I try to focus our energy on, of course, with the support of the group that I work with. But yeah, that we've now we have a pipe ceremony to kick off the year for the first years. We've had multiple trips out to it's a place called Wanuskewin Heritage Park, which is an Indigenous focused heritage spot outside of Saskatoon. We do sweats every term, and so take people out on the land and give them that opportunity. But I'm also working very closely with the administration and faculty on various issues such as admissions. I want to know and see those numbers of Indigenous students climb. I believe there needs to be so many more of us going through this so that we can continue to push for changes. I've worked on trying to ensure that there's enough classes and that the mainstream classes start to try to integrate Indigenous perspectives into them. Not to, point out any classes, but in my first year, there was maybe a lack of that. So it was always something that was taught maybe one class at the end of term, and it was like way over here. Meanwhile, I think for the non-Indigenous lawyers who are coming up, I think they need to understand how integrated this is going to be and how much it's growing. And so I've been really pushing for that end of things. Scholarships, more scholarships I hope to see because, financially it's a barrier and very hard for Indigenous students to go to law school. And just integrating various different changes whenever I can.
Yeah.
It's been an uphill battle. Law schools are uber colonial institutions. I will say that, they're there to teach the colonial law, and that's what they're there for. And so I'm really grateful to the people who are working at the college because they've been very open to what I've had to say. They've been receptive. They're working to try to implement the changes. Their hearts are in the right places. I recognize it's going to take more than the 3 years that I'm there for the big changes to happen. But I think that I think they will continue to push and change and move things forward. So yeah,
Amazing.
some
Dominga,
of what
tell
I've
me,
been
I had anti-colonial scholar here who we both know, Andrea Minal, who was a guest on my show. She had very interesting views, and one of them in particular I thought was very interesting. For some reason, I don't think I've heard that before, but I think it would make a lot of sense. Is incorporating teaching an indigenous language, at, you know, in schools. What
yeah,
are your views about that? And do you think it's something that we should implement nationally?
absolutely,
Hmm.
absolutely. I mean, That was my whole previous career. I think I know that Indigenous law resides within the language. This is something that the elders have been saying, and it cannot be translated necessarily over into English that well. And so sometimes you really just need to learn the language and what those feelings are behind what they're trying to get through.
Hmm.
And that's how you can relate to the law. And so, absolutely, I am a fan of trying to integrate more and more language into things. At this point, I would just be happy if they teach more Aboriginal law in law school. I'm aiming a little lower, I think, in terms of what I think is viable now, but in a terms of a long-term goal, I back Andrea on that 100%. I'm like, yes, it's in the language, and even for the Indigenous lawyers going through those institutions, for them to come out of there and not have an opportunity to learn natural law is going to be a detriment to them when they go to work with the communities who are reconnecting with their languages, who are reconnecting with their culture, and they're going to be using those languages and culture as a way to move forward with their laws. And if you do not have a foundation in that, you're going to struggle to help them move forward. And so I think specifically for the Indigenous students, it's essential. But I also believe that it's vital for the non-Indigenous students to start to move outside of their comfort zone
Hmm.
and learn about these things as well, because they are going to have to cover it. Even if you're going into tax law, you don't think that Indigenous people have tax issues, and the communities themselves, it's a whole different funnel of like the way they tax Indigenous nations or don't tax, when that happens, when that doesn't, contract law, you could argue, and some do, although I think I disagree a little bit, but that treaties themselves are contracts. I think they're more powerful than contracts because they can't be broken the way a contract can. But you know, bringing those ideas across the board into the colonial law to figure so they can understand how it's been used as a tool against us it's essential, and I think when I think about anti-racism education, I don't know if you know this, Ray, it was born out of Black legal scholars in the
In
States,
the States, yeah.
right? Looking at how the law had been used as a tool against the African Americans down in the South to victimize them and oppress them. And the law has been used and continues to be used against Indigenous people up here the same way. And so I'm definitely paying attention to what's happening down south with how they're moving. And it's really scary to see the pushback against that
Hmm.
in recent years, and that those discussions being challenged and those truths being challenged, because I think Canada doesn't even know. I don't know how many people even know about the Indian Act. I don't know if people know the rules that Indigenous people have. I don't know if they know. I have to carry around a card that has a number on it that proves that I'm Indigenous and labels me as Indigenous or First Nation, sorry, to the government. And that idea and that concept of numbering of an ethnicity by Canada was actually borrowed by Hitler in the way that he treated the Jews, and in the numbering system that he used over there. And so we live in that right now. We're living in that right now with that kind of oppression happening. And so, yeah, I think colonialism is not good for anybody. I don't think it helps even the settler communities. I think they need to move beyond this and start to think outside of the box and be open to other ideas. Yeah. I'll leave it there.
It's so
and
much
and
this.
and especially the ideas of the nations who and the belief systems of the nations who are already here,
Yeah, there's so
So
much to say, and you're definitely a powerful voice, and I hope you continue to do great work that you're doing. I have one more question. I know, for the past few years, especially, in organizations, the federal, you name them, we have something called, a land recognition before, speeches. What are your views about that? Are we, are folks doing it well, or do you think people there's room for improvement when it comes to land recognition?
I think you know how I'm going to answer this.
I can't speak for you.
Like, that was a loaded question, Ray. Yeah, I think there's room for improvement. I absolutely think there's room for improvement. I believe it was a start. I think it was an important start, and I think it needs to continue. But I also believe that sometimes people are saying it without really thinking about what that means and the emotions and things that exist behind it. It's really easy to read off a little pre-written paragraph that says, "I acknowledge these nations," but if you're not doing anything to help move that forward and move those nations forward and outside of the forward past the oppression, and you're not standing with them to push back against these things, I think I don't know if it's necessary to even say it sometimes, because it's just lip service at that point.
Well,
But there's really I think an intention behind it that people need to be aware of and think about when they're saying it. I saw this really funny skit where there's a woman does a land acknowledgement, and she's at a theater, and she does this land acknowledgement, and one of the audience members stands up and says, "So shouldn't we leave then? If we're on someone else's land, shouldn't we go?" "Well, no, we're not going to go." And just like, but I don't understand. She kept saying, "I don't understand. If we're acknowledging we are on someone else's land and we stole it, why are we just sitting here gonna watch the show?" And I mean, they do it tongue in cheek, but I think that there's behind that
there's a
sketch,
message.
there's a truth to it, that if you're just going to say it because you're supposed to say it, and it's the politically correct thing to say right now, I think you need to step back and think about what's actually happening in the agency that you're working in the organization or the government department that you're working in, that is helping to move this back to where it should be. I don't want to say land back, but I do believe that there should be some connection to that. If you're acknowledging that the land is stolen, then what are you doing about it? Is it just, oh well, that's just how it is, or are we going to try to fix things?
Amazing. Dominga Robinson, I appreciate your time. I appreciate this conversation that we had. Definitely leaves a lot to think about. A lot of great information. Can you tell the viewers, where they can find you? Obviously, I'll post your information in the description of this video,
Right.
but where they can find you, what you're working on right now, and what we can expect from Dominga Robinson in the next year.
Yeah, people can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm just Dominga Robinson on there. I'm pretty sure I'm the only one, so shouldn't have a problem finding me. I'm on Facebook as well, Dominga J Robinson. Feel free to follow me on there. I'm going to continue to finish my law degree over here and move into articling, and finishing off what I started here, to hopefully get myself ready to help out the nations. But in the meantime, I'm still president of the Indigenous Law Students for USask, and I'm now the student representative for the National Indigenous Law Students Association on the Indigenous Bar Association. I know it's complicated. Lots of
No,
acronyms, lots of acronyms that I didn't use, but I'm the IBA rep for NILSA. But yeah, that's usually where I'm busy doing that stuff. So yeah,
thank you
it's
so
been really
much.
great to chat with you.
Same here, same here. I have a feeling it won't be the last. I like to end my conversations with this. You know, we learn today and we lead tomorrow. I thank you for all the great work that you're doing in this community, helping, this nation become better and, have a seat at the table so people can understand the plights of, different communities. So thank you for all the great work you're doing.
Right on. Thanks, Ray.
All right. Thank you.